Okay, good. So Nun Gimel Amid Beis, near the very bottom, about 4 or 5 lines from the bottom, we just started a new topic, a new sugya, and the question was, we talk about Maser Sheni, and we know that when you redeem something from Kodesh, Hegdish, Maser Sheni, anything that is dedicated to the Beis Hamikdash, then you have to add a chomesh, a fifth of the value of the product that you're redeeming, and that fifth also goes into the Bedek Habayis, goes into the treasury of Kodesh, and that is a surcharge that people pay when they do the redemption. It's kind of like I guess call it today maybe an accessory fee, or I don't know what it is, but you pay that extra fee and it happens to be a chomesh. So you wouldn't even think that there would be a discussion on this, but there is a very, very deep machlokes, which we're going to really cover today, whether or not that chomesh is a chomesh of the actual value of the Maser Sheni, which is called chomesh milgav, which means an inside. Milgav means from in, an inside chomesh, meaning 1/5 of the value, or chomesh milbar, meaning from the outside. What does that mean? That means that with the chomesh added into the keren, you now have the fifth. You have 5 parts. So there's 4 parts, and the chomesh becomes the 5th part. Or is it 5 parts and the chomesh is on top of the 5? So what's the chilik? The chilik is, for instance, if you have an item that's worth, let's say, that's worth 20 zuz, and if it's 20 zuz, so milgav, meaning from the inside, meaning you have 5 divided into 20, which is 4. So the chomesh is 4 zuz because it's 1/5 of 20. 20 is the actual value of the Maser Sheni, and milgav means 1/5 of 20. If you say it's milbar, then it's a different calculation, because you then take 20 and you have to divide it not by 5 but by 4, which then comes out to 5 zuz, and then the 5 zuz of the chomesh makes it 5 parts. So there's an extra zuz that you have to pay if you are doing it mil bar. You have to pay 5 zuz to make 25, which is then 1/5, or milgav, it's 1/5 of 20, which is 4 zuz, and that's added to the Maser Sheni. So it's really 2 different ways of looking at what the chomesh is, and this is a major machlokes. We're going to see it's a machlokes tanoim, machlokes amorim. It's really a big machlokes, and that's the setting for our discussion today. So that's the subject as to whether or not the chomesh is a chomesh from the inside or a chomesh from the outside. How do you look at it?
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Omer Ravina. So 4 lines from the bottom. Omer Ravina says as follows: Toshima, I'm going to bring you a raya as to which side is correct. What's the raya? Abalim Omer be'esrim, right? So what happens? What happens is that he brings the Maser Sheni to Yerushalayim and gives it, but here he has the actual Maser Sheni, right? So now the Beis Hamikdash can't use the actual Maser Sheni. It's the field that we're talking about. So they have to auction it off to someone who's going to pay, and that money will go into the treasury. So here's what happens. Balim omrim be'esrim. If the Balim say, I offer 20 zuz for this produce, for the field and the produce that I'm going to pay, that I'm going to redeem, I'm doing 20. V'chol adam be'esrim. Now, there's bidding going on, just like there's bidding for, Aliyah and Shabbos or anything else. What's the bidding? So you have other people who are bidding, and they also say esrim. So the owner of the field says esrim, and the bidders say esrog. So what would you think? All right, on the face of it, who do you give it to? Everybody says esrog. Says the Gemara, Habalim Kodmin. The Balim, if it's even Steven, the Balim always have Kadima to be the first one to bid. Why? Here's the key. Because their 20 is not really 20. It's 20 plus the Chomesh. The person who's on the outside bidding, he gets it for 20. But the Baal has the privilege of getting it for 20 plus the Chomesh. Now, we don't yet know what the Chomesh is, but it's a Chomesh. Clearly, the Gizber Tzedakah, the treasury, is going to say to the Baal, you get it because we're getting more money. They always want to maximize the value. You're going to get more money from the owner than you will from a outside bidder. So it goes to the Baal. Okay, now we don't yet know what the Chomesh is. The Gemara is telling us that it goes to the bidder. We're going to go through a process, and then we're going to learn what the Chomesh is. Okay, so now that's scenario number one. What about the following? Omar echad hare olai be'esrim be'echad. The owner says 20. The bidder says 21. He's now one zuz higher than the owner. So now we have a scenario of who do you pick? Says the Gemara, in the top of Nun Dalet Amud Aleph, we're switching to Nun Amud Aleph. Habalin nosim eson v'sheish. The Baal then gives 26 zuz. 26 zuz. Why 26 zuz? Says Rashi. So we know that he has to give the Chomesh, no question. Why does he have to give 26 zuz? He gives 20 plus the Chomesh. The treasury is still ahead 4 shkolim because his 20 plus 5, the Chomesh, let's just say 20 plus 5, is greater than 21. Why does he give 26? Says Rashi. It's definitely 26. So listen to this. Forget about the Chomesh. The owner is giving 20, someone else is giving 21. Treasury can't be shorted because the owner is only giving 20. We want to give it to the owner. We know the owner is going to pay well above 20, but we don't want to lose that extra zuz that the other person has bid. So basically the Gizber is going to get it from two sides. They're going to get it from the value of the Masa Sheni, 21, and the value of the Chomesh. That comes out to 26. So that's how you get 26. In other words, we're taxing him if he wants it. If he really does want it, which he apparently does, the Chomesh is a given. But vipastis, how does it pass that we're giving it to him for 20 when someone bid 21? So we're tacking on the extra zuz. That's what Rashi is saying.
The auctioneer is in charge of this bidding.
Exactly right.
What is he knows that from the owner's side, he's really not 20, it's 25.
Correct.
And so he's getting, so when he bids another 1 to 26, he knows that. So if the owner bids, he's got to bid at least 1. So he adds in, so the auctioneer is smiling because he knows he's getting 26 out of the deal.
That's correct, but he's not going to forego that extra zuz that the other bidder increased over.
Well, the other bidder is five zuz behind the owner.
Because he's not chai b'chomesh, there's no question.
Right,
there's no question that in-house, the owner is the better bidder all the time because there's an added sort of
so the other bidders know that they're bidding against 25, not 20.
Let's just say, or I mean, it could be that they're just bidding and they see other people bidding and they want to get the best deal. They say, to me, I'll give 21. He says 20, I'll give 21. Now we're going to see as the Gemara goes on, we keep raising the bar here one by one. We're going to see in the Gemara just in a minute. But anyway, let's look at the Rashi again. Al korchen esrim b'shei she'i efshe losses lo be'echad ve'esrim shenimtze hektish nifsid. Hektish is going to lose. B'chamisha sloim u'lebalam nami lo paschina min keren sheshama ish acher. You can't go less than the principal that someone else bid. Hilkachnos chop aleph lekerem. You give 21 to the principal. B'chamisha l'tesefes chomesh, and 5 to the extra chomesh. V'aliliu shel zeh hala b'dama of sela a most of chomesh ela keren sheshamahu. So now listen to the concession. The concession here is that we're not going to tax him a chomesh on 21. See, that's the chiddush here also. The chomesh is only on what he bid, not what the gizbar is charging him over and above his bid, which is one more zuz. He does not have to pay a chomesh on that extra zuz. Yashikayach. In other words, it's enough that we're taking 26. We don't have to take 26 and a fifth, whatever that comes out to. So so the Rashi is telling us two things. One, that the owner can never pay less face value, keren, face value, than the highest bid. And also the chiddush that we don't tax in the chomesh on that extra zuz. So
Why
those
would
are
you-
two things
why would-
Rashi is clarifying for you.
Why
Yeah.
would you add another chomesh on top of a bidding process?
Because in theory, if he's supposed to give a chomesh on everything he pays, he's now paying 21. We're forcing him to 21. So there's a havamina that he has to pay a chomesh on 21. Rashi says, no, you only bid 20, your chomesh is on 20.
20,
We're
yeah.
only adding the one because the hefsid, the loss to the treasury is one zuz at face value, not at chomesh, at face value. So we're going to make you pay that extra one zuz for face value, but we're not going to tax you a chomesh on that extra zuz. So the theory is that we've already taxed him chomesh. Now all we have to do is make up the difference between his bid and someone else's bid, and that's one zuz. Now look at the Gemara. Gemara goes on now and says esrim v'shnayim. What happens if he bids 20 zuz and the next guy comes along and he bids 22 zuz? What happens? Says the Gemara, nosum esrim b'sheva. For the same reason that we just said, he has to give 27 zuz, 20 that he bid, 5 for the chomesh, and the 2 that he has shorted the treasury because of the other high bid. And then, again, the Gemara goes on and says, now what happens
I have a lot of
if
difficulty here.
it's 23? Then
But-
now we're up to 28 because it's 20. Again, you're always adding the chomesh, which is 5 from 20, and then you're always adding the uptick of what the other fellow is bidding, because how does it pass that the treasury is shorting itself? It's a hefsid treasury. Yeah, I know, Jay, it's frustrating.
No, it's just from the auctioneer knows at the beginning that he's getting 25 minimum.
Correct.
So the other bidders who are bidding 21, 22, 23,
Hmm.
he's going to reject them. They can never catch up unless they go to 26. All right. So
Right.
what this is a not a rigged bid, but it's a bid that's not really straight, because when they bid 21, they know they can't get it, because the bidder, the auctioneer, is representing the Beis Hamikdash, and he's already got 25
Right.
before the bid starts.
But he's not required to announce that. He's not required to announce, I have 25 shkalim, who wants to bid higher.
They look over and they see Jay, the owner of this. He's sitting and bidding in the group. So
So if they see him and they recognize him and they understand the system, then you're right. They will know. So all they're doing is upcharging him. In
they're
other
raising
words,
his bid,
in other words,
his cost. They're raising his cost, but
they're raising his cost. Right, exactly right.
it's
Exactly.
not a nice thing to do.
Well, it's not a nice thing to do. I'm going to equate it lahavdil, not in this context, but if you give someone right of first refusal on a purchase, let's say you give right of first refusal, and then you get an offer, you're not required to tell the offeror, oh, by the way, whatever you give me, I have to take it to somebody else for right of first refusal. So you try to get the best deal you can from the other fellow, and then you go back to the person who you made the pledge to and says you have right of first refusal. It's not fair because you know going in that he may or may not get it. He may or may not get it. I mean, the owner always has the option of saying, you know what, I'm out. I'm bowing out. He can say I'm bowing out, that I don't want to pay that. Let the other fellow get it for 23 or 25 or 22 or whatever. He wants to bid, but he's not mechuyev to bid. So once he throws his hat in the ring, there may come a point in which he says, like when you're in an auction, you bid up to a certain point, and then you stop, and the auctioneer looks at you because he's expecting you to make another bid, and you say, finished, let the other guy have it. I mean, there's a point in time where you say, I'm out.
How can the owner pull out? He hasn't completed the donation and all given the money to the Beis Hamikdash.
No. But his field, he's given his field. He's given to the Beis Hamikdash. The only thing is we want to redeem what he gave so that the Beis Hamikdash isn't saddled with the produce, but they have the money. But that doesn't mean that he can't say, I'm out, and let someone else do the Beis Hamikdash is going to get the money either way.
He finished his job.
Right.
He finished his job. Then after that,
he now wants to.
Hamikdash decides to auction it off.
That's correct.
And he can bid, and others can bid.
That's correct. That's correct. That's one way of redeeming Maser Sheni, is that you bring the actual produce, and then the Beis Hamikdash, the Gizbar auctions it so that they have the money, and that money becomes free and available to anybody to eat, which is a big mitzvah anyway. It's a bigger mitzvah maybe for the one who brings the food, but maybe at some point he says, I have to bow out. I can't do it. But either event, it's no black mark on him. It's just that, he had his chus and he gave up the chus, and he gets kedima on the chus. That's the point. He gets first right of refusal because it is his produce. But at some point he may say, I'm out. I don't want to pay 3, 4, 5, whatever zuz it is. So
the Torah is requiring him to turn the field into money before he comes to Yerushalayim. So what's the timing on this?
Right. So that's the normal course is that, David, that he redeems it because he doesn't want to schlep it up. But what happens if it isn't an inconvenience for him to bring it up, and he brings it up to the Beis Hamikdash and says, here it is, and now I want to redeem it because I want to be able to, well, I don't know, make a big party, whatever the case is. And so the Beis Hamikdash now have it, and now it's time for the Beis Hamikdash to act. So the Gizbar says, okay, we're going to redeem this, and we'll take the money, and you'll have the produce, and you'll have your simcha. So in other words, it's a switch on the normal way of doing Maser Sheni. I agree, but it's an opportunity for the Beis Hamikdash here to make some money, and the owner is very much for it. He's so it's in other words. So this Mishnah actually, so now, okay, so let's take a look here a minute, because Rashi is going to clarify something for it from what I just said. This Mishnah that he's quoting is a Mishnah in Erechim. Take a look at the next Rashi. Okay, so we're talking about something a little bit different. I have to take it back. We're talking about something a little bit different. The Mishnah there in Erechim, which I looked at last week, does not talk about Maser Sheni. Sorry. The Mishnah in Erechim talks about a person who brings the produce of a field that would go to the Beis Hamikdash. Maser Sheni doesn't go to the Beis Hamikdash. So Maser Sheni is not really the subject of our discussion. That Mishnah in Erechim is talking about where you have a field, and that you have to bring that produce to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, not Maser Sheni, which you're eating, but the produce that belongs to the Gizbar, and they're auctioning off that produce in order to have the money and then deconsecrate the produce so that everybody can eat it. So it's not Maser Sheni. This Mishnah, we're going to equate it to Maser Sheni, but it's not Maser Sheni. Okay, so let me rephrase. This Mishnah is talking about you bring the produce of a field that is belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. Let's go. You can say it's regular. Well, you can say it's regular masa, but you have to say that someone pledged this field to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, make it that way. Someone said, "I have produce here, and I want to bring this to the Beis Hamikdash as a gift." You've now made it holy, and it now belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. You can do that. Now you come to the Beis Hamikdash and have the food. You can't eat it. The Beis Hamikdash doesn't want the food. They want the money to be able to use it for Bedek Habayis. They then hold an auction. The auction is to whoever comes, including the person who brought the food. He can't eat it, but it would be a schus for him to redeem it and then take the food and eat it in Yerushalayim. That's his schus. So the Mishnah is there in Erechim is telling us he has kedima. He has the first right to be able to bid. Now he's standing there bidding, and we just went through bidding. He bids 20. That's his bid. He knows he has to pay a chomesh because anytime, not just Masa Sheni, anytime you bid for something that is holy to the Beis Hamikdash and it's your produce, you incur a 20% fee. That's just the way it is. It's not just Masa Sheni. It's also anything that you bring Kodesh. You have to know that I'm going to be upcharged 20%. And I'm happy to pay it. That's my schus. Somebody else isn't so happy to pay it. So that's when the bidding goes 20, 21, 22, 23. Always with the opportunity of the inside fellow, the one who brings it, to have kedima. So this Mishnah is now elucidating us and telling us that the halacha is he has to chomesh and he has to constantly pay the difference between his bid and the other fellow's bid, so that the Beis Hamikdash is not losing money, quote unquote. They're not losing because of the chomesh, but they're losing because of the comparable bids between the guy, the owner who brings it, and his counterpart who is bidding. So that's the scenario. It's not Masacheni. It happens to be.
Your original analogy, Rabbi, to the bidding for Aliyahs is correct, because we know there are people who bid people up purposely so that the shul gets more money, or in this case, the Beis Hamikdash.
That's correct.
The analogy is correct. Yeah.
No, the analogy is correct. Exactly. And Jay, I think you sense maybe it's not the right thing to do, but it's not money into his pocket. It's money that's going into the Beis Hamikdash. If I can increase what the shul gets, fine. So I'm an indirect shaliach here, and I want the shul to get the most money. So I'm high bidding. Now, if the other fellow falls out, I'm stuck with it. At the end of the day, I'm taking a risk because I know that I'm going to have to wind up paying a 25 in either event. So I'm trying to edge it up a little bit. But if you're going to tell me that I'm going to be stuck paying that extra zuz every time I uptick, then I got to think 3 times. Do I want to do that? Because I'm paying 20, I'm paying 5, and then I'm paying every time I uptick 1 more zuz. I'm paying that. So as long as you're good with it, then do it. But if you're not good with it, then you can get stuck. All right. In any event, so that's the scenario. So now we're up to 23, right? Esrim Bishmona. Now let's get to the next line. Habala Nasan Esrim V'Teisha. What happens if he goes up the Esrim V'Arba? So then he has to give 29. Esrim V'Teisha. Why? Same thing. He gives 20 plus 5 plus 4 because the other one was at 24. So up to 24, it's all the same, right? Every time you add a zuz and you outbid, you have to pay that extra zuz. So right now we have the original owner at 24 paying 29. Okay, now we're going to hit the magic number. What's the magic number? The magic number is 30. Okay, Esrim v'chamesh. What happens if the counter bidder bids 25 zuz to the owner's 20? Now we have, what do we have? 20 plus 5 for Chomesh, plus 5 for the upbid. So says the Gemara, Habalim nosnim shloshim. The Balim,
They're fed up with the bidding and they just go to 30.
okay, so now it's gone to 30, right? Now it's gone to 30. And this is what he has to give. Okay, so
I think
let's
the
take a look at Rashi. Here, Rashi has a comment. Until now,
Okay.
Rashi has no comment because we know from the previous Rashi that he's chayiv to pay a chomesh plus the difference, but he's not chayiv to pay a chomesh on the increase, meaning on the extra zuz, 2, 3, 4, there's no chomesh. That we know.
Excuse
Now-
me, Rabbi. I think Stuart has a question from Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah, Stuart, sorry, go ahead.
No. Oh, your hands kept,
Yeah, okay.
sorry.
All right, so look at Rashi. Rashi says, "V'hosam be'erchin porich." There's a kasha. V'neima legizba also gavra betrokoi harebo acher tachtenu shechofet liken kamisha ola keren b'chomesh amarti ve'en hektish nifshit. V'lama nachif ezel losei shloshim. Why do we ask him? We know till now that we don't want the gizber to lose, so we ask. But when it comes to 30, apparently, in hector, the lama nochav as losa shloshim v'siyam hamishna oma echad harihu shali be'eser v'sheish omam hegiyascha. So in other words, the kasha is like this: if we're coming to 30, so then the Gemara asks over there. So then, in other words, he's saying there in the Mishnah or in the Gemara in Erchen, they ask the Shaila when it comes to 30. Not only has he given a chaymesh, right? So one second. So the let me just think about it. So Esther Mechomesh Habala Nashnim, they give an extra. So hold on. Okay, so what's the kasha here? The kasha is that if he's at 30 and he has to give 20 and 5 plus the other 5, says the Gemara, Lefisha ein mosifun chomesh al ilu shel zeh. The Gemara makes the point that we don't add another chomesh on that difference. Shema mina chomsha milabar. The Gemara wants to bring a raya now from these incidents, especially from the last one, that it has to be milabar, it has to be from the outside. Why? Because we're saying that the total of what he has to pay is 25. If it were milagav, if it were from the inside, then why is he being charged? Why is he being charged 30? He should really only be charged 29, because even though the other fellow is at 25, his bid still was only 20. So at 20, a chomesh is 4. We said milgar. Milvad from the outside, it's 5, because when you look from the outside, the chomesh has to be 1/5 of the total, and therefore when you have 20 zuz and you add 5 and you look at it from the outside, that's 1/5 of the total. But if it would have been milagav, if it would have been from inside, then his total should have been only 24, because you're adding 1/5 of what is the inside 20 zuz, so then it should have been 29, not 30. So how do we come to 30? Elamai, says the Gemara, we have to learn from this that the true chomesh is milabar in order for there to be 25. So that's what when Ravina wanted to give his proof, and he said Toshma. The Toshma is because if you look at all of the circumstances when there is these bids and the person is outbidding the actual individual, it's because the individual is paying the extra chomesh, and he's paying the difference between his bid and the other fellow's bid. But if it was bid from the inside, then his bid should have been 1 zuz less. And the Gemara there in Erechim says, no, he has to pay the full amount. Therefore, he says, it's a raya, shema mina, chum shemalabar, that the chomesh is milabar and not milagav, not from the inside. So that's Ravina's raya. So now let's take a look again. Right? Shemati the ein hegshit nifser. The lama nochuv ezeh losei shloshim. Why does he give 30? V'siyama Mishnah Oma Hari Hu Shali Be'esrin V'sheish Oma Hagiascho. So in other words, he could have said that you take it. In other words, again, he could have called the bluff and he could have said, okay, you take it, but he didn't, because he bid and he kept bidding that extra amount, and because we give him the kadima. So Rashi explains that that's why he winds up having to pay the extras. Okay. Says Rashi, Shemamin achum shemelabar, midik toni chomesh al esrin sloim, chomesh sloim hara chomesh min achutz. So it's chomesh min achutz because of the fact that we say that it's that Mishnah constantly says 25. So it's a raya that they're taking the position of the Manda Omar who says that it's chomesh milabar. Okay, so Shema Mina, that's the conclusion. So in this discussion between what is the proper chomesh, Ravina brings a raya from this Mishnah and Gemara and Erechim that the chomesh is milabar in order to reach the numbers that the Mishnah is saying, because they articulate exactly how much he has to pay. Right, Shema Mina. Okay, so now the Gemara, which we've seen before, not only is this the machlokes there in the Mishnah, but oftentimes when there is a machlokes in a brisa subsequent to the Mishnah, that sort of gives the imprimatur. Not that the Tanoim needed the support from the Amoraim, but we see sometimes later on that there are either other Tanoim or Amoraim who are concurring. So then the Gemara goes on to say other Tanoim are saying the same thing, Ketanoi. We have a machlokes Tanoim in this case on the same thing. What is the machlokes? The Yosef Chamishisa Olav, where the Torah says in Vayikra that you have to add a fifth. Shiur b'chomsho chamisha. The explanation is that the principle and the chomesh hu v'chomsho chamisha, that the chomesh, the fifth, right, shall be one part of the entire whole. So if you have 5 parts, the chumsha chamisha, the 5 parts includes the chomesh. By definition, that means bulabar, which we said means you look from the outside and you see when you add the 5th, now there's 5 parts. That's what he means by chumsha chamisha, that the chomesh makes 5, right? Who says that? Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia says that it's bulabar. Rabbi Yosef Omar, is Chumsha Shel Keren. He holds that it's Milagav, says Rabbi Yochanan. And we have this, so in other words, we see the same machlokes that we have been talking about is machlokes Tanoim in another brisa. And we bring, so again, Ravina's Raya from that Mishnah is that it has to be 5, because the Mishnah constantly says that the original owner who brings the field, or brings the hegdish, has to pay 5 zuz on top of what he has paid. Okay, so that clarifies what the position is. Says Rashi, and a chomesh malabar shu revia shel keren. It's malabar because it's 1/4 of the keren, and the chomesh makes the 20%. Okay, so now the Gemara has concluded that that's the pshat in chomesh. So the chomesh has to be a chomesh of the higher amount, the 5 sloim rather than the 4, because it's chomesh from the outside. Okay. Now that we've tackled that issue, so now the next question the Gemara addresses here is what happens if you don't pay the chomesh? Okay, Masa Sheni. Now back to Masa Sheni. That was about hegdish. So now you have Masa Sheni. You're mechuyev to eat it, to redeem or eat it in Yerushalayim, and you have to give a chomesh. What happens if you don't? Is there a consequence? Is there a penalty? What's the pshat? Because it is min Torah. The Torah says you have to give Masa Sheni, and the Torah says that you have to add a chomesh. So Iboilahu frek the Gemara the chomesh ma'akev. Is the chomesh ma'akev? In other words, do we force him? And if he doesn't give, we don't allow him to eat the Masa Sheni. In other words, what level of strictness do we apply to the chomesh? Because the Torah tells us 2 things: Masa Sheni, or any consecrated food, and then a chomesh. But it seems like the chomesh is a separate thing, but it's separate but equal. Separate, but it's equal, that the Torah is min Torah. So midaraisa, you have to give a chomesh, but it's not inherent in the actual. It's not inherent in the actual product, whether it's in this case Masa Sheni. It doesn't say that it's part of the Masa Sheni. It's a separate but equal to the Masa Sheni. Correct the Gemara. Chomesh me'akev or ein me'akev? Is a chomesh ma'akev? Is it required? Does it? In other words, not it's required. It's required, but does it hold back your being able to redeem the Masa Sheni, and therefore you have no choice but to give it on the spot? Or maybe not. Maybe you can redeem the Masa Sheni, and then you can owe the chomesh. After all, the chomesh is a lot less than the Masa Sheni, so maybe we'll allow you to redeem it and eat it in Yerushalayim, and now you have a debt to the gizbar of a chomesh. So that's the Gemara's kasha. How do we look at it? So the Gemara says as follows: Dalid b'dalid parik. That we go dollar for dollar. If the Masa Sheni is 4 zuzim, dalid, then it's 4 zuzim to redeem. Straight 4 zuzim. What about the chomesh? V'aknafshei moisif chomesh. And by himself, meaning himself, he adds a chomesh. So now the Gemara is telling us that they're 2 separate things. They're not linked. L'chayra, they're not linked. Alma chomesh lo mi'akev. So by the lashon of what we're saying 4 zuzim is what is the value of your Masa Sheni. But you have to give a chomesh, and you owe the gizbar a chomesh. So that seems to indicate that the chomesh is not ma'akiv, that it doesn't prevent you from, not that you don't owe it, it doesn't prevent you from giving the Masa Sheni because you have that extra chomesh. That's one way of looking at it. Or dilma arba b'chamisha parik. Or we can say, no, that the 4 zuzim of the Masa Sheni, you can only redeem it with 5 zuzim, right? Arba b'chamisha parik. You can't redeem it with 4. It's worth 4, but you have to redeem it with 5. The chomesh ma'akiv. And then if you look at it from that perspective, then the chomesh is ma'akiv. So basically, we're trying to get to the root of the question of what is a chomesh. Is it required on the spot, or is it a separate chiyuv that you owe the Beis Hamikdash? And again, the Beis Hamikdash will find a way to collect it, but it doesn't prevent you from eating. Let's say you can only stay in Yerushalayim a day, and you want to eat the Maser Sheni, and here you have the 4 zuzim that have been redeemed. You don't have the 5th zuz, okay? He didn't come prepared. Are we going to hold you off and saying you can't redeem this Maser Sheni because you haven't given us the 5 or not?
But that
right?
disagrees with holding that the chomesh is independent, as we said
again?
a moment ago. It disagrees with the fact that they're saying here that the chomesh it's a 5th, but it's independent of the earlier parts.
Of the 4, right? No, that's the question he's asking. He's saying, now, we know you have to pay a chomesh. There's no doubt about that. But can we force you to prevent you from eating Maser Sheni if you don't have that extra zuzim, the chomesh, with you? In other words, can I write an IOU to the gizbar and eat the Maser Sheni and still owe it? Or is the kedusha of the Maser Sheni only redeemed once I've given the money to Hegdish? That's really the question, whether the money has to be in Hegdish, in the Beis Hamikdash's possession when we release the Maser Sheni. That's the nub of the question.
So they're not saying that it's an independent donation. They're saying that
it's a required donation, but
with the regular Maser Sheni money, and you can't separate them.
But you don't have to give it at the same time or not. In other words, your chiyuv. In other words, we've now obligated you to pay a chomesh. No question about it.
Later or something.
Right. Can it be a week later? Can it be by the next regel? Can it be, I'll get the money, I'll send it to Yerushalayim with a shaliach? In other words, all these questions now come into play as to whether or not a person can owe the Beis Hamikdash money and redeem what he came to redeem. That's really, do we put the pressure on him? You can't eat until you pay?
Where do they get this notion to separate it from the whole Maser Sheni and create this whole different world?
Okay, because if it was not the lashon of the pasuk, if we look at the pasuk in Vayikra, if he brings it down, the lashon of the pasuk. Hold on, let's take a look. So Vayikra. So
sorry for the question.
Yeah, no. We should always look at the pasuk and see exactly the lashon. So Perek Chav Zayin in Mekukosai, it says as follows. V'im b'behema, here it talks about behema tameya. Im b'behema tameya upoda be'erkecha, okay, and you're going to redeem it according to its value. Okay, according to its value, comma, v'yosaf chamishiso olav, and you will add 1/5 on top of it. V'im lo yiguel v'nimkar be'erkecha, and if you don't redeem it, it'll be sold to its valuation. So right away, the pasuk is telling you that the valuation and the chomesh are separate. First, it says valuation, value it. Then it says a chomesh, and the pasuk concludes. And by the way, if you don't redeem it, we're going to sell it for its value. What is its value? The underlying value without the chomesh. So clearly, this pasuk is showing us that the valuation and the chomesh are two separate things. Otherwise, they would have put a caveat that the chomesh was part and parcel of the valuation. Because here it says, if you can't pay the chomesh, then we're going to sell it to somebody else for the underlying money, which is less than we're getting from you. So you have the obligation of paying the chomesh. But the chomesh is a separate part of the valuation. And if you can't pay the chomesh, someone else will pay the valuation. So you see from this, Jay, that the pasuk itself is creating two separate chiyuvim. A chiyuv of erkecha, value, and then a chiyuv of chomesh. So now that you have two separate valuations, now the Gemara asks a good question. If a guy comes with the valuation and doesn't have the chomesh with him, do we force him or do we allow him to pay later? Because remember, the erkecha they could always get from somebody else, but that somebody else will not be obligated to pay a chomesh. You're obligated to pay a chomesh. Do I say I have a bird in hand, you're paying the erkecha, and I can still get a chomesh from you later? Or it's almost like I'm cheating myself, because if I go to the other guy and I get the erkecha, I have no chance for chomesh. I can only get the chomesh from you. So why not give you a little a rope to say, okay, pay the erkecha, the value, and pay the chomesh later. At least I know I'm getting chomesh. From the other guy, I won't even get chomesh. So that's the svara here. That's the theory as to why they should be two separate. Because the pasuk itself gives us an indication that there is a valuation and then a chomesh, and then we see that they're separate because if you say no, then the other guy gets it just for the valuation without the chomesh. Why don't we charge the other guy a chomesh? If chomesh is a responsibility of the actual redemption, then we should pay, then the other fellow should also pay a chomesh. Teretz is it's not a part of it; it's separate, but we have to make the decision whether or not to allow him to do it. So that's the kasha here. And Ravina says, "I'm going to bring you a raya. I'm going to bring you a raya as to how we look at this." And the raya is from a different Mishnah, talking about something else. Toshma, says Ravina. Hadamai. What is demai? Demai, we said, was sofek masa sheni. In other words, let's say you someone who is not a Talmid Chacham, we call them an Am Haaretz, you had a field, and we say that most people, even if they're an Am Haaretz and don't know the laws clearly, will give Truma, Masa Sheni, they'll do all of that. But there's still a possibility that he won't. In other words, there's a sofek whether a person who is not totally clued into the halacha will not redeem. So that food is called demai. So what do? Suffolk demai, we give masa sheni a second time. Okay. So maybe midaraisa it's okay, midrabana no. The Torah says if you have suffolk, it's lakula. Midrabana, we say no, we're not going to take it on the chin. We're going to make sure that it's given. So midrabana, the person who gets the demai has to give a second slice of masa sheni. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, Adamai ein lo chomesh ve'ein lo beer. That Mishnah now comes to tell us, this is a Mishnah in Maseches Demai. There's a Masechta called Maseches Demai, and he says that if you have Demai, you don't give a chomesh. How about that? You don't give a chomesh because you're giving it perhaps for the second time. We don't know. So midrabanan they don't include Demai. Ve'ein lo beer. And there is not a beer. And now there's a separate thing with demai where there's a chiyuv in the cycle of 7 years. At the end of the third year and at the end of the 6th year, anything that has not been given, in other words, consecrated but not given, has to be destroyed. So let's say you owed masa sheni and you didn't give it. Then at the end of the 3rd year and at the end of the 6th year, you have to burn that masa sheni. It's no longer extant. You can no longer keep it around. You can keep it around up to that point, but not beyond, and you have to burn it. So what does that mean? That means masa sheni, at the end of the 3rd, you have to beer. You have to burn. Says the Mishnah, if it's demai masa sheni, you don't burn it. Meaning that we're lenient, just like we're lenient in demai and we don't require a chomesh, a fifth, so too we're lenient and don't require beer. Okay, that's the Mishnah. So now the Gemara says, okay, so what do we learn from this? So Ravina says from that Mishnah the following: Ha keren yeshlo, but keren, the keren of Masa Sheni, that is not redeemed. In other words, the keren you still have to give. My tama, why is there a difference between the keren of demai and the chomesh of demai? Why? The reason is Karen the ma'akiv b'doraisa. So now to the point you were asking, Jay. Karen the ma'akiv b'doraisa. Karen, the principle of Masa Sheni, which is required min Torah, right? So in other words, Masa Sheni midaraisa, you have to redeem, but right. But Isa b'drabanan. So if you don't redeem it, the rabbis still make you redeem it. Chomesh teloma akev b'daraisa. Okay, chomesh, but chomesh in this discussion that is not midaraisa, right? Then less midrabanan. So then there is no stumbling block to redeem the maser. Therefore, the rabbis don't require the chomesh of maser sheni. So in other words, from this Mishnah, he wants to bring a raya that chomesh is not midoraisa. You hear? In other words, what's it? Even though it says chomesh, even though it says chomesh, then midoraisa you have to give the keren, and the keren is always out there. You can never eat it without redeeming it, right? So the rabbis then will also be ma'akev. The rabbis will be very strict. And regarding Maser Sheni, they're going to say that you cannot eat it unless you redeem it.
But this is Demai we're talking about, aren't we? Or did we switch out of Demai already?
Right. No, we're talking about Maser Sheni Demai. Maser Sheni Demai. In other words, the issue is right. But Chomesh the lo ma'akev b'doraisa. But according to this Mishnah, he's saying that the chomesh, which is not ma'akev, the redemption of Maser Sheni, midoraisa, less of midrabanan. Therefore, the Mishnah says that the rabbis do not require the chomesh on the mind. The question is why? Why doesn't it require? So the theory that now we're espousing is that the reason why they don't require it is because the chomesh is not midoraisa. It's only midrabanan that is a and in Demai there's no requirement. So in regular Maser Sheni there is a requirement. The rabbis are strict.
So
because there's a suffix, and chomesh is not the oraisa, therefore they say that you don't have to give the chomesh for Demai. For regular Maser Sheni, you have to give the chomesh.
So it's saying that the pasuk only referred to the regular, not the Demai.
Correct.
How do they come to?
That's the drasha that they're making. They're making the drasha that from the Torah, chomesh is only a chiyuv midoraisa when it's also Maser Sheni, not suffix Maser Sheni. Once you have suffix Maser Sheni, then you're already loosening the range.
Downgraded to the Rabbanan.
Now, think about this for a minute. The rabbis are usually the ones who are more machmir than the Raisa. Why? Because they want to create a siyag. They want to create a fence that you shouldn't be over midaraisa. Therefore, even if the Torah is lenient, the rabbis are not lenient. Here, the whole Demai was a suffix daraisa. If it's a suffix daraisa, then they're not going to add another chumrah on a suffix daraisa. So the chayra from here, he wants to give a raya. Says Ravina, it's a raya that the chomesh, not that it's you don't have to give it, but you don't have to give it at the same time as the Maser Sheni. We're not going to pata you from a chomesh in Maser Sheni d'oraisa, not demai, Maser Sheni d'oraisa. Of course, you have to give a chomesh, but we're not going to be so stringent to say you can't eat the Maser Sheni until you give the chomesh. That's the raya he wants to bring. Not chas v'shalom the chomesh you're redeemed. You don't have to give it. You always have to give it. But from the Mai, we're going to learn out that the chomesh is a separate matter, and therefore we can be a little bit lenient and say
go backwards up the chain.
Go back and come back when you got the money. In other words, we trust you, and we're going to see. I think later, and when we go further, we're going to see how we're going to collect that money. but at least for now, we're going to say, don't worry, we're going to collect the money, and therefore, so a lesson in Rabbanan. So
So the Beis Midrash doesn't lose anything.
the Beis Midrash won't lose. Okay, let's take a look at Rashi here, and I'm just see what Rashi says. Rashi says, Chomesh ma'akev achila chutz l'chomesh ad sheyitin hachomesh. In other words, we say the chomesh is ma'akev, and we prevent you from eating the entire Maaseh Sheni until you bring the chomesh as well. That was the question. Achanafshei me'elov eino b'chalal hapidyon. Itself, it's not part of the pigeon. She'arba zuzim podu maser shehu kenegdo. Because again, in the initial discussion, we said it's worth 4 zuzim, and I pay you the 4 zuzim. Or dilma arba b'chamisha parek. Or maybe we redeem 4 with 5. Kachu gezeres hakosuv. That's what the Torah means. In other words, this is the other side of the coin. That's the gezeres hakosuv. Shahachomish min hapidyon hu. It's part of the pigeon. Ve'ein shava arba niftim bepoches mechamisha. And something worth 4 cannot be redeemed for less than 5. No, those are the two sides of the argument. Hadamai masu sheni shel damai shechayev hu chachamim lahafresh halokeach ma'amaretz. Like we said, it's from someone who we can't be 100% certain that he tithed his produce. Ein lo chomesh in podu ba'alav. So there is no chomesh, right? The ein lo beer. B'shana shlishis, in the 3rd year, should Stavi Yisrael Levayer Kol Masoseyam min Habayis, like at the end of the 3rd year, the losses Limishahem Rotzim. In other words, they have to redeem it to Niksiv Miksei Shalosh Shalim. It's after the 3rd and after the 6th. Every 3 years is what he means, not just 3, every 3 years. So you have a chiyuv of beer. So and we're saying that on Damai you have no chiyuv of beer. Hakeren yeshlo the kozman shelo podu also laachlo chutz lechoma. My tama ein lo chomesh v'yeshlo keren the ma'akiv midoraisa b'masa doraisa isa b'drabanan b'masa demai drabanan. Okay, so again, so to summarize, the chomesh is milabar. It's from the outside. In other words, it's a fifth of the total, not a fifth of which would be more than a fifth once you get finished. Milagav means from inside. No, we have to give from the outside. So you basically have to give extra money, and it's not me'akev. L'chayra, we learned from here that it's not ma'akev, that you can give your Maaseh Sheni and still owe the chomesh and be able to redeem the Maaseh Sheni and then pay it later. And we learned that chiddush from the Mai, which is a whole different circumstance than regular Maaseh Sheni, but from the Mai we extrapolate that when the Torah says chomesh, and we see it from the pasuk, because the pasuk says erkecha and chomesh, that they are 2 separate things, and we learn out that erkecha is erkecha. That's the value. Once you do the value, you can have the Maaseh Sheni. If it's the owner, he has to pay a chomesh. That chomesh, yes, we expect you to pay it now, and you can't pay it now, then we give you some leeway, and we allow you to pay it at a later date. Okay, so that's where we are. But again, the subject is not over, because it goes on a little bit further, because there's all kinds of other questions of what happens if he doesn't give the chomesh. I mean, it gets complicated. And how do you collect the chomesh? Is there an enforcement mechanism? So, I mean, the Gemara had it, I mean, the Beis Hamikdash had its ways, and we'll see about that. But in any event, it continues on a little bit further, this fascinating discussion, which of course, today we don't have it, so we don't really have an appreciation of what people went through at the time. But when you think about it, people who were farmers, I mean, they didn't necessarily have a lot of money. I mean, they had the produce, which is great. And if you're redeeming your own produce, which is the highest form of kedusha, and now you get to add a fifth, and I got to figure out, where am I getting a fifth from? I can barely scrape together enough to give the Maaseh Sheni. Now I got to pay a fifth. So they don't always come to Yerushalayim prepared to pay it, because they just don't have the money. It's not as if they're rolling in money. You know, today we see all these, and then after October 7th, we get all kinds of emails. I'm sure we all get them, that we need to support the farmers of Eretz Yisrael because they've lost so much of their and again, they feed Eretz Yisrael, so we have an appreciation of what they need. But they're not rolling in money. They don't have so much extra money that they can say, okay, sure, fine, I have no problem with it. So the Gemara is saying that the Gizbar has to be sensitive to that, and this is a way of being sensitive, that we appreciate you're bringing the Maaseh Sheni. We want you to do the mitzvah, and in order to do the mitzvah, we're going to allow you to do the mitzvah, and then the Chomesh, you'll pay us later. So they're not forcing him to miss the mitzvah because he can't give the Chomesh. And that's, again, it shows the compassion. Everything we do in the Gemara, we see has to do with monas and equity, that we're not only strictly mishpat, not just strictly justice, that we give leeway and we find a way. Here, this is a whole dreidel by Demai to give us a leeway that by regular Maaseh Sheni, you don't have to give the Chomesh at the same time. We only learned that from Demai, not from Maaseh Sheni.
Right.
So in any event, this is an appreciation of the way we treat Achenu B'nai Yisrael, is that even though there is a mitzvah for you to redeem it, and you should redeem it, and then you get quote unquote penalized. I'm not saying it's a penalty, but it means you have to pay more. But still, we're going to give you that opportunity to pay more later, so that you're not strictly constricted. So
It's like a tax,
Yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah. Any questions or?
It's like a tax. I mean, the Demai, that part is like a tax on the Demai, not a punishment.
Well. The Chomesh and Demai isn't necessarily different than the Chomesh on Maaseh Sheni. It's that even the rabbis treat it more leniently. In other words, everybody knows you pay a Chomesh on Maaseh Sheni. But when it comes to Demai, which is a suffix to begin with, now the rabbis are saying, you know, it's a pasnish. Here, we're taxing you a second time because we're not sure that you gave it. So we're already extracting an extra 5 fourths and whatever it is from your pocket. We're not going to tax you on top of a tax. So we say we're going to give you a little bit of a break. But that little bit of a break is what allows us to learn pshat, that in the Doraisa Dika Maaseh Sheni, not the Mai, it's separate. Not that you don't pay it, but the chiyuv is not necessarily at the time that you're doing Maaseh Sheni. It could even be later. That's the only thing we extrapolate and say you're still chayiv. But it's something we learned from the Mai, because the rabbis didn't have the heart to say, not only are you going to have to give the Mai, you're going to have to give a second time, but we're going to give you the Chomesh also the second time. That kind of is like the Mishur Sadin. That's going over the top. So that we don't do. That we don't do. All right, so we'll stop here, Mr. Shem, and next week we'll have you back, David. You'll be back in town, and
yes,
you'll be back.
I'm willing.
All right, so Tuesday, everybody, keep in mind, if we can, anybody who's in shul, have in mind.
My mother. It's Ada Bas Menachem Aryeh.
Ada Bas Menachem Aryeh.
Yes.
All right, sei gesund. Safe
Thank
travel,
you.
everybody. A good week.
Thank you.
Safe trip, David, for coming back.
Thank you very much.